Hi, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre The Beast Crayton Show. Today is an emotional show. We have on the show today Felicia C. Davis, who's going to take us into her life's journey of overcoming, understanding who she is, and taking the word C in her name and turning it into courage. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Andre The Beast Crayton Show, Miss Felicia C. Davis, all the way from Utah. Welcome to the show, Felicia.
Felicia Day.
Let's get, how you feeling today? You okay?
Good. I'm going to get ready to go to work here soon.
Okay.
How are you?
I'm doing great. We talked a little bit prior, and your story is definitely a story worth telling, almost a novel within itself. Take the viewers down briefly a little bit about Felicia before we get deep into your story.
About me today or about me and my life?
In your life. Life.
Okay. Well, as a child, I kind of had a rough upbringing. I was raised around a lot of addiction. I've got 3 siblings that 2 have been heroin addicts and 1 has had meth addiction and alcohol addiction. So I have not much of a support system because I had to learn to have boundaries with them. So that's been difficult. I lost my mother to cancer 6 years ago. That was incredibly difficult. I've got 3 children, and I also have a son who is now 18 that I've never met. I gave him up for adoption. I gave birth to him when I got pregnant when I was 17 and gave birth in January 2005 when I was 18 years old, and I gave him up for adoption. So that's been a really big challenge for me as I've raised my own 3 that I've got. I was married at 19 and had my first daughter at 20, my second son at 24, and my third at 27. And my youngest has epilepsy and autism, and I was divorced at 27 and remarried at 29 and divorced a year and a half after my second marriage. So I am a single mother that works full time and 100% is financially supporting my family.
What was
it hasn't been easy.
What was it? You said you dealt with addiction and stuff in your household as a young child. What kind of support system? You say no support system. When you say no support system in your household at such a young age, how did you manage to maneuver? Was there any family or anybody that can reach out to recognize what was going on? Whether it was the school system, whether it was the church, whether it was the neighbors, did anybody see this dysfunction in your household?
Maybe some of my close friends, their families would say things to me or they would notice things, but I think at the time I was raised in Utah, and it was a very tight-knit LDS community, and a lot of the mentality of the LDS community is shame and guilt. And so I think for my family, the way that we would deal with things is we would brush it under the rug, is what I would say. You just don't talk about it. You just don't. You just pretend like you have the perfect life.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned something about when we was talking earlier. You have a brother. What was that like? You at least had a brother. What was that like? Were you guys functional? Did you guys get along? What was that like?
I actually have very vague memories of my brother. He is 7 years older than me, and he was taken out of the home when I was very young. And I actually don't know all of the circumstances that led to that, but I know part of it was his relationship with me was inappropriate. I know at one point he was found on the grass with me in the front of our neighborhood, and the neighbors actually, I believe they called the police, and that was one situation. And then there was another one where my mother found him in the bed with me, and I think I was so young, I didn't know how to place it in my mind as to what was happening, and it took years of counseling for me to bring those memories up, but it was some form of sexual abuse.
Your mom is passed, God rest her soul. When this was happening, and your mom, was it your mom and dad that decided to remove your brother out of the household? Because you was actually too young to remember a lot of that. But before she passed, did they ever open up and tell you what was the reason for the separation?
That's the unfortunate thing is my mom's passed away, and I wish I could ask her those questions. I've had my aunt fill in some of those gaps for me, right. But if he was placed through the state, they actually put him in the psych mental hospital up in northern Utah. So he has some bipolar, and I want to say schizophrenia.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know exactly what happened, but I just know he was removed from the home.
How do you manage to function, a young lady in a dysfunctional household? With heroin addicts, and how were you able to get food? How did they really provide for you?
So the strange thing about that makes it so confusing in my brain is that it didn't seem dysfunctional. Well, one, you're kind of used to it.
Right.
You're around it, and the only way I could describe it is being in fight or flight. And I was always in fight or flight, just not knowing what to expect. So with that being said, I've had a lot of anxiety throughout my life. I would often take my little sister and hide in the closet if there was an incident going on, or if we were left home alone with my brother, or just left home alone in general.
What were some of the other incidents? You brought up something. You got into the flight or fright, you and your sister. What were some of the other incidents outside of your brother that made you and your sister go into those things in your household?
Lots of yelling, lots of abuse. My father, I love him, and it's taken me a long time to forgive him, but he would pick me up by the back of my hair. He hit me with a cane. He hit me with a hanger. And we would often go to our mom to tell her, like, hey, this is happening. And it just didn't exist. I felt like my mom was supposed to protect us, and she didn't.
What about your little sister?
So,
was she also abused?
My sister and I just kind of created.
Was your sister also abused as well?
My dad, never my mom. Yes, she was. We just found ways. My mom took very good care of us. So she made us dinner. She took us to school. But when it came to the abuse or any of the stuff that was actually going on, the drug use, it was just kind of not acknowledged. It didn't exist. It wasn't there. Mm-hmm. I think that my mom didn't know how to go there.
Right.
So it was happening kind of in the background, but we would pretend that it didn't exist, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Now let's move forward a little bit. You're growing up, you're in high school now, and you must have met an individual because you become pregnant. Take me down that journey briefly. Do you think, let me ask this, and I know this is kind of hypothetical, but do you think by the time you got 17 years old or 16 or 17, you start trying to find a way out of that situation, and maybe the relationship at that time may have seemed to be the easy way out of that difficult situation?
At home.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely was filling a void and an escape, and I spent most of my time out of the home as much as possible. Had so much anxiety, so I actually ended up turning to alcohol. I was really big into partying when I was 16 and 17 and smoking pot. And luckily, I never got into any heavy drugs, but drinking. I would go to these parties and drink. And he was 19 years old and in college, living in his parents' home. And I would often go over there and stay the night with him.
What was your parents saying about it? I guess they was in their own world still.
I just feel like my mother, my dad was there, but he did not raise me. He was very passive. You never heard a word from him. It was always my mom, but I think my mom was just kind of in denial. She didn't realize I made up my stories and she wanted to believe them. So I pretty much got away with anything.
So you meet your boyfriend, you get pregnant at a young age. What's that like? How does your life begin to change now? You now have a child.
Yeah, and we actually were never together. We never dated. We were just friends with benefits, and we were intimate a few times under the influence, and I ended up finding out I was pregnant. I didn't find out until I was 4 months pregnant. I went to Planned Parenthood, and they told me I was 20 weeks along. And it was pretty devastating. And I just, 17-year-old girl in high school trying to figure out how to hide a bump under my sweater.
Eventually, you had to tell your parents, correct?
By the time I was about 6 months, I couldn't hide it anymore. And my friends all knew. One night I went upstairs to my mom's room and laid on her lap and started crying. And I said, "You're going to hate me. You're never going to forgive me." And it took me 10 minutes of crying on her lap. And she actually asked me if she said, "Are you pregnant?" And I said, "I'm pregnant." And she told me, "Well, I know because I buy pads and tampons, and you hadn't in a long time." And that's actually how she had put it together that I was pregnant.
What happens now? You're pregnant, but it's still dysfunction in the household. How's your little sister adjusting? I know you got to be worried about your little sister because there's still some dysfunction. Your mom is sympathetic with the fact that you're being pregnant, but you still know that they got their own issues they're dealing with. How is your younger sister dealing with this? Are you still trying to protect her as well?
Well, unfortunately, I was not the best influence at the time, and I took her to parties with me. And even while I was pregnant, I would still go to parties.
Wow.
And my sister, I didn't, once I knew I was pregnant, I wasn't drinking. But she would go, I kind of led her into that lifestyle for some time of partying. And she ended up having a boyfriend at 14 and kind of engaging in the same activities.
So you have the baby, now what?
Well, my parents found an attorney, and we talked about adoption, and I picked a family through my attorney. It was closed adoption, which was the worst idea ever. But back then, that was kind of more of the thing to do, is closed adoption. So I don't know that I really wanted to give my son up for adoption, but I also was very aware of the situation I was in and the family support that I had, and it terrified me that he would end up living a life like I had been living.
Moving forward, what happens after you give your son up for adoption? That is emotionally traumatizing as well, and now you're still young, but you just given up a child of yours. Did you find the guy that you was with, was he even sympathetic about your choice? Was he involved in the decision making? Did he come forward and say, "Hey, you know what, we can do this together, my family might step up"? What was the support system like on his end?
non-existent. He actually got married while I was pregnant to someone else, and she got pregnant. He actually wanted to take me to Las Vegas and have an abortion. He offered to pay for it, offered to take me, and I just, it was not for me. I couldn't do it. His mom was very involved because I actually found his mom through the white pages or yellow pages in phone book.
Yeah.
Because I knew where he was from. We pinpointed who his family was, and my mom called his mom, and his mom was actually very supportive. She was there for the birth. He was not. She held him, was there in the hospital with me for 3 days, and he showed up with his wife, I think the night I delivered him, and held him for about 5 minutes. But I never saw him after that.
How do you move on? What's the next step after the adoption? And now you still got to go on. You're 18 years old. You made one of the toughest decisions of your life. How do you now move forward? Do you get married? What goes on next?
Well, I mean, I didn't have very good coping skills, and I didn't want to go to counseling. I didn't know how to go through that process at that point. And so I did the next best, or the thing I knew is I actually found a distraction. I met my husband. He and I started dating 2 weeks after I gave birth, and we dropped out of high school and ran away together. That's how I dealt with that.
So you guys did a Romeo and Juliet for real.
Oh, yeah, 17 years old, and we just 2 weeks after giving birth.
Where'd you wind up going? Where'd you run off to?
Northern Utah. We moved to Orem.
What happens after you get married? You tie the knot. How old were you when you tied the knot?
How old was I when what?
When you got married. How old were you guys when you ran off to get married?
We lived together from when we were 18, but we waited until we were 19. We got married in September of 2007. I was 19.
What was that marriage like at 19 years old? Did he have a job? Did you have a job? Do you guys have any type of goal plans? You're married now. What's your game plan?
There wasn't really one. His parents are very wealthy, and they kind of supported us through a lot of that time. And we ended up living in a townhome that his dad had. I don't know if he had rented it out to somebody, but he had some property that he allowed us to live in, and we fixed it up, and that was part of the condition of moving in. So we moved back to St. George, and I was pregnant within 3 months of that marriage. So then it was mom mode after that.
Was it a beautiful trip? And you know, when you got married, how long did it stay great before it started getting rocky?
To be honest, it was never great. It was very unhealthy, very toxic, a lot of arguments, a lot of yelling. We tried to make it work. We had our daughter. I think our kids was where we connected most. He's actually a wonderful dad, and I am a good mom. We both love our kids very much. So that was the connection that we maintained throughout our marriage.
What made the relationship toxic outside of you guys being really young, but literally, and I'm trying to take the viewers into the mind of still a young individual that just gave her child up for adoption, just came out of total dysfunction, trying to find her identity. You get married, hoping to think this is the way to freedom, but it's toxic. What are some of the toxic things that you was enduring while you was hoping that you can make a great marriage?
There was just a lot of dishonesty, and there were signs that I wish I would have noticed early on, but there were women that would come around, and I was naive and I would trust him, and we're just friends, but I would see text messages from women, and then within, I think, 4 years into our marriage, I found out that he he had an affair with my coworker's wife.
With your who? Co-worker's wife?
So we would all get together and do dinners, and so we met each other's spouses when we have these get-togethers. And I was working at a massage ND in northern Utah, in Midville, and they met one night and apparently connected, and she was married to my coworker, and they ended up having an affair behind their backs. But her husband actually had an affair with my little sister. So it's a big old...
Whoa, back up. Who was having an affair with your sister?
So her husband actually, well, it was a one-time thing, but he ended up sleeping with my little sister in my home when we had a barbecue one night. And then somehow my husband connected with his wife, and they had like a 3-month affair. They were emotionally and physically involved. But so they had both been unfaithful, all connected to my family.
How did that go over? How did you deal with that knowing that was your sister? How did you and your sister work this out?
A good question. She didn't say anything to me. It was him that told me. And it was the only reason we found out about the affair was he had come clean to her maybe a couple months later. 3 months later, he came to her and had said, well, I slept with Felicia's little sister. And that's when she had admitted that she was having an affair with my husband. And she was pregnant.
She was pregnant?
Yeah.
By your husband?
Yeah.
By your husband?
So while she was sleeping with my husband and her husband at the same time, so we just did not know who the father was at that point in time.
Do you know now?
Yes. I went to counseling for the entire 9 months that woman was pregnant with my husband. And, you know, I told him if it was his child that I couldn't continue the marriage. I just wouldn't be able to do that. And 9 months later, when the baby was born, we did a DNA test. My coworker, he had her do the DNA test, and we found out it was her husband's child, luckily. So
okay.
At that point, my husband and I decided to try to work on our marriage as they continued to work on theirs.
How do you work on that type of marriage, and then knowing that was your sister, and then do you even salvage a relationship with your sister, or did you just cut ties?
My sister and I never really had any problems. I was so focused on what was happening to me, I guess it didn't really seem to matter at the time.
Mm-hmm. What about now? You're older. Have those wounds healed? Did you make amends? You're a lot older now. You're 35. Are these things still troublesome to you?
Well, I mean, she didn't sleep with my husband. She slept with my coworker. Is that our?
Okay.
Was there a little? There wasn't any confusion.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess I didn't hold anything against her. She was young, and she made a mistake. We talked about it a little bit, and I mean, in a way, I guess I kind of blamed him because he was a lot older. He was married and kind of took advantage of a situation, of an opportunity that was there at the time when she was under the influence. They both were.
So now, what happens with that marriage? Do you eventually dissolve that marriage, and what happens after that?
When I was 27, we did finally get divorced. We tried to make it work. We got filled in the temple and had another child, and I couldn't trust him. And without trust, there is no foundation in a marriage. You just can't do it, and I couldn't do it.
So what happens after that? Do you remarry? Do you date somebody else?
So I did. I dated somebody. I met somebody in about September of 2016, and I was divorced in August of 15. So about a year later. But I was actually still dating my husband even after a divorce, on and off.
Really?
It,
You know, some
it
people
was
would say that's kind of like dysfunction at its highest. You know what I'm saying? Based on everything that you've been through, why keep putting more toxic? Oh, because why? Probably you thought that was the normal thing,
it was familiar.
right?
It was familiar because I didn't recognize it. I didn't even see that it was bad. I guess I think there was a trauma bond between the two of us, and it was just unhealthy.
So you move on to the next guy after apart, but you still was dating another guy. When do you separate, and what was this other guy like? What's the new guy like? Let's talk about the new guy. What's the new guy like?
Well, that was a rough 3 years. We dated for 3 years. Super great guy. He just admired everything about me. He just put me on a pedestal, made me feel like I was beautiful and smart, and he loved that I was physically fit and into exercise. But that slowly started to diminish over time. He would make comments that were, you know, the things that he fell in love with, the things that made him fall in love with me started to become a problem. And that scared me. I
What do you mean it
remember
started to
wearing,
become a problem? Give me an example. Give me an example of one thing that he loved about you, and all of a sudden it became an issue.
we went to the gym together, and I was wearing a tank top and leggings, just like any other girl going to the gym. And I remember watching him pace the gym back and forth, and one of my male friends came up and said hi. And then all of a sudden he booked it to the door, and he was trying to walk home, and of course, I chased after him, and he told me that what I was wearing was inappropriate, and I was asking for attention. That I was asking for it. I'm too sexy, and girls like me, girls that look like me, girls that have long legs and curvy bodies, that they shouldn't wear things that way, that look like what I was wearing, because I'm asking for attention and asking to have males come on to me. And it was my fault.
What did you think about that?
Oh, well, I didn't know. I was so in love with him and so blinded. I actually thought that in some way it was my fault. If a man talked to me or flirted with me or said something to me, I immediately would think about, well, what am I wearing? Is my cleavage showing? I blamed myself. I carried some shame there.
When did the light, before we wrap up, your story is so immaculate. I'm trying to get the whole story in. You eventually, hopefully, got rid of this guy, right? Before I ask my question, what made you get rid of him?
When we got married, we had never lived together before. Mm-hmm. So when we got married, I started to notice patterns. He was going out to his vehicle every 20 minutes, in and out, in and out. My car would smell like pot after he'd been in it. And I know pot's not the worst thing in the world, but he was vaping all day long. He would nod off on the couch, just kind of checked out. His behavior changed. Mm-hmm. And so I started to have some concern that he was using. He brought home a baggie of pills one day, and, well, I hurt my back, and my client gave this to me. And it just kind of started to be familiar. Like
a lot of snowballing, I guess. A lot of snowballing happening.
Mm-hmm. It started to remind me of my family, some of my siblings and their behaviors when they were using drugs. And I had some concern for his son and my children, so I reached out to his ex-wife, and I said, hey, I'm concerned about your son. This is what I'm noticing. And within 5 minutes, that woman called me. And it was the first time we'd ever really had a conversation, and we both cried on the phone together. And she told me that the reason she left him was because they had a little baby, and she came home one day, and the baby was in the garage playing near all the tools and saws, and her husband was passed out on the couch. There was vodka on the ground. So he was kind of a drunk. He had a porn addiction, a drinking problem. He had 6 DUIs. They put him in. She said she tried to put him in rehab 3 times, and he left every time, and just still to this day denies that he has a problem.
When do you wake up and start taking control of you? You've been in all of this dysfunction. That had to be a light. You don't have several light encounters letting you know this just ain't right. When do you start to take accountability for yourself before we wrap up?
I think that when you're so devastated and so exhausted, you just will do anything to change it. I was so broken that I was forced to look at myself and what was I doing to create these scenarios over and over in my life, these cycles. And so I needed help, and I reached out and got counseling, and I started to put some of those pieces together, and I could either lay down on the floor and die and, end up doing the same thing over and over, or I could choose to take that adversity, grow from it, and lean into the uncomfortable, lean into the fear, the unknown, and I could dive in and get to know myself and deal with all of that past trauma. I had to go down into the dark rabbit hole and recognize all of those things that were happening in my life and acknowledge it and allow myself to feel it.
When you went to therapy, when you finally made the decision to seek help and go to therapy, what was the one thing out of your therapy session that you look back on and go, damn, I can't believe I couldn't control that, at least that part of my life?
I would say just the toxic relationships in my life that I was attracting. That was what was I was creating the chaos in my own life.
How hard was that to admit to yourself?
Oh, really hard. It came with a lot of shame and guilt. Shame for what I put my children through. But also one of the most, it created so much growth for me that I would change it now, because I had the opportunity to learn who I was, what I wanted, what I had to say mattered, how I felt mattered.
Who are you now before we wrap up? Who are you now?
I am not a victim. I am a survivor. I am a fighter. And I guess I'm comfortable with who I am now. I'm comfortable with my failures. I don't let those things scare me anymore. I continue to move through it so that I can be a stronger person, a better mother, a better friend. Boundaries. I learned boundaries. I learned how to have boundaries with people in my life.
With that said, leave the viewers with something positive that keeps you going throughout the day. What message would you leave the viewers right now?
You guys, don't be afraid of failure. We all have things in our life. We all have problems. Your failures do not define who you are. You can make a change tomorrow. Don't let your past, your trauma, your pain get in the way of what you really want. Lean into the adversity, because adversity creates growth. Let that be your greatest coach in life. Let it teach you something. Because I promise you, you may be in a dark hole right now. You may think you're so far down the rabbit hole that you just can't get out. But I promise you, if you just keep focusing on you and building and creating the life that you want, lean into that pain and it will take you through to the other side. Pain is finite.
Sounds good. Felicia, it took a lot of courage. That C in your name definitely is for courage. It took a lot for you to come out, and I appreciate for you to that you took the time to come on our show and share your story. My support goes out to you. Please keep staying strong. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Crayton Show.